afterward about free consulting that you can get about connected real estate. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here today, and I hope Larry's still in the audience here, because while I was hearing his comments, I just realized I have 2 strikes against me, technology company and Wharton. So I'm just, hopefully he's somewhere around here, so we can actually have it out through this presentation. Peter actually set the stage incredibly well for a conversation around what we at Cisco call smart connected communities. I'm going to run through a couple of trends that we're seeing in the space, and that's why we actually are spending time in the space. I'm then going to share with you some really incredible things going on around space, place, technology, and connectivity, and how that's really changing our world. And then I'm going to end with globally some of the different things we're doing in communities of the futures and cities, and also briefly talk about Songdo before Tom comes up here and spends more time on Songdo and kind of the incredible development going on there. We've already talked about very powerful forces in terms of creating new opportunities from data, from cloud, from virtualization. I'm going to talk about the Internet of Things. We're hearing a lot about analytics and cities creating data, as well as social networks and collaboration. And all of these are kind of converging together really powerfully in terms of assisted intelligence is what we call it. How does your device, as Peter shared, he's okay sharing where he is at any given moment, connect with geospatial location, bring in the cloud for services, video collaboration, which is one of our really big bets in terms of how people will be communicating and working in the future, and what are the implications on your real estate and corporate real estate portfolio around it. So before we actually get into that, I'm going to talk about, from our perspective, why are we in this space? And our CEO, John Chambers, really looks for market inflections. Where are these transition points where things are fundamentally changing compared to the way they used to be in the past? And what we're seeing is 4 mega trends around the labor forces in the Western Hemisphere. From an age perspective, the aging being rapidly increasing in the Western Hemisphere compared to other parts of the world. So we're seeing this age and decline. We're also seeing population growth in India, China, other parts of the world, and just proportions we didn't anticipate. The world's population is becoming urbanized. We've talked about the fact that already 50% of the world's population is currently urbanized. By 2030, we're expecting it to be 60%. And I believe the number is by 2050, we're going to have 25 new cities, 25 new communities with over 1 million residents. Tremendous implications from an environmental sustainability perspective, from an economic sustainability, and then from a social sustainability, which I'm also going to talk about. So clearly what we did in the 20th century now has to change for our new 21st century with all this urbanization. So that was another inflection point for us. We also realized from 2004 to 2013, tremendous connection, collaboration, and proliferation of devices. So we've gone from 300 million devices to 1 trillion. And what does that mean? Everything becomes connected in a very different way. And I want to take the liberty, working for a technology company, I think it's fair for us to speak in this space, in terms of the first phase of the internet really being a B2B phase. It was around businesses connecting and collaborating and e-commerce. The next phase was the consumer phase from about 2003 to 2007, where it was really about the online shopping, the social networks, et cetera. And I now believe we're actually moving to what we call an industrial phase, which is how do we take the virtual world and the physical world and really meaningfully connect the two. And I do want to respond to a couple of comments, and I will around the first 2 speakers, which I really enjoyed this morning. And I think our value proposition is not saying it's an either or. I always encourage the people I work with, and when I speak at conferences, it's the right activity and it's the right work environment. There are times this is really important. This, as well as the coffee breaks and the drinks later, because we connect in ways that are very important for future innovation and thinking. There are times you can meet here, and then my next meeting with Peter will be over telepresence. And in one day, I can hit Dubai in the morning, Amsterdam in the morning, Korea in the evening, and go home to my apartment in Manhattan. So it can be fairly powerful, so I would not discount that. And then what I'd like to do also, briefly touch upon how these market transitions are creating new opportunities. We've kind of moved from, the emerging countries leading innovation. We talk a lot about knowledge economies, but I would argue that I feel India and China is doing a fairly good job now of picking up on some of the knowledge work, and I think our next big bet's going to be creative economies, creative clusters, where diverse, and I would agree with Larry, where really diverse people come together through place to connect, and then you layer in ubiquitous technology, and I think the possibilities are limitless in terms of taking place and people, and then layering in technology. There's also what we talk about connected life and really the experience. And again, back to kind of John Chambers, our CEO, he pushes us saying, by the time you figure it out, it's obvious and it's too late. So think early, and that's something that our group spends a lot of time thinking through. So back to kind of really quickly, and I'm just going to share a minute here because Peter also talked about this, is that we talked about the mega cities, we've talked about the energy usage, we've talked about massive urbanization, we've talked about big cities getting bigger. And I was in Mumbai less than 2 weeks ago on a panel with IBM and a couple of other colleagues talking about, ICT for more livable cities. And a colleague of mine on the panel got up and talked about mobile technology in India and how that is truly transforming communities. And they weren't smartphones. And my big takeaway was we need different kinds of technologies for emerging countries. We need to think through what works here. It doesn't just transport to India. And it was a really interesting learning lesson for me in terms of how urbanization in India and China is going to be different from urbanization where we are today. I think we've kind of briefly talked about this in terms of aging populations in the West, shrinking countries, like from a population perspective, like Germany and the Scandinavian countries. And we've also talked a little bit about hypergrowth. Where is this growth coming from in terms of India and China and the Middle East, just from a population perspective? And I think Peter also covered this. So now I want to switch gears a little bit, take us back to 2006, where President Clinton at the Clinton Global Initiative spent some time with us and said, we've got to think through sustainability, more environmental sustainability, and how Cisco can really make an impact in this place. And we started thinking through broadband almost as the fourth essential utility in city planning. How can we use broadband and networks to power cities in new ways? So we have these individual silos of real estate solutions and physical safety and security, transportation, public safety. And how do we bring that together really holistically across a platform and maybe use the network to start moving forward on these initiatives? So we thought about 5, 6 areas we'd like to work on. This is prior to our whole world of smart connected communities. We focused on work, we focused on buildings, urban mobility as we saw mobility trends, energy, as well as connected socio-economics. And part of this was 3 mayors stepped up to work with us, the mayor of Amsterdam, the mayor of Seoul, and the mayor of San Francisco. And we did some pretty incredible things in this space, which I want to share one of them with you, an example around Amsterdam. But this was essentially the foundational work around our thinking about sustainability. By 2009, we started thinking it's not just about environmental sustainability. It truly has to be about economic and social, especially with all the rapid urbanization we're seeing in China, India, Asia, and we're going to be talking about Songdo. So really, let's think through kind of a platform approach for delivering citizen services, for delivering healthcare to villages, for really empowering even citizens with data to make better decisions about their own energy usage. And this is how it actually began. In the building space, which we know buildings are one of the largest polluters and users of energy in cities, we started thinking through, can we start networking buildings in a way where your north side and your south side of the building speak to each other a little bit more intelligently? Can we start automated demand response around devices and rooms that are not being used? We have something called a personal virtual office, and we demoed this in Bangalore and San Jose, where we actually have rooms which you use your badge to scan in, your children's pictures come up, the blinds come to your whichever level you like them at, the temperature, you have your meeting, you have your telepresence, etc. You badge out and the entire room shuts down. So can we start transforming spaces into experiences? And I think this is something that from a real estate perspective, we also need to start thinking through. Can we make our real estate more dense, Maybe our tenants take smaller footprints, which I know nobody likes to hear, but denser footprints. So maybe they'll be willing to be spending more for that Class A real estate because it's a denser technology-rich space. The other example I wanted to share with you is part of this Clinton Global Initiative work, which we call Connected Urban Development, is an incredible example in Amsterdam. We started with the mayor of Amsterdam and the mayor of Almere, which is a suburb of Amsterdam, and there's a traffic ring around these two cities. And essentially we got the two mayors, like mayors love to do, and we did a big press release around how we're going to put in two what we're calling smart work centers in these two cities, where people can come in. There'll be some childcare services, there'll be some public sector services, there'll be open work environments, there'll be ubiquitous connectivity. We partnered with IBM and ABN AMRO and the city of Amsterdam and Almere, and people could connect to each other. And essentially we started with 2 in 2006. We now have 99 smart work centers, some of which that use Cisco technology, some of which that don't. And what we've done, an unintended consequence of this, is we've spurred innovation in an area we never planned to do. We were thinking through an environmental sustainability issue, and we've now spurred social and economic sustainability. What we've also done, Peter talked a lot about multimodal. We've come up with reservation software, multimodal, where you can actually, on your device, come out of the subway and say, okay, today I have a telepresence, so I'm going to need a different work environment. You can book a telepresence online, you can book a space, you can see where the closest wireless is available to you as well. And we've also now tied up with a company called Tata to say, let's not just have telepresence within the Cisco network, within the JLL, or within a company's network. Let's have public telepresences where people can come in by the hour. You don't have to fly all the way. And I do want to clarify this point. I do think certain meetings are very important to do them in person, especially the first meetings. But I think you can be incredibly productive with follow-on meetings through telepresence, through these other ways of actually communicating. And we also reduced our carbon footprint. We had some, we also created a platform for entrepreneurs to find each other. And now our next version of the software is going to be presence-based system. So I'm interested in architecture and urban planning and city thinking. So I can actually go to a smart work center where people log in and they let people know their location and their interests. And I'd rather choose a smart work center in Columbus Circle versus downtown because that's where like-minded people want to be. So I think this is really an important point, the smart work centers that we're going to be taking forward in cities of the future. We also tied up with a company called WorkSnug, which some of you might be familiar with. And essentially they have an app that you can walk all around the city and it'll give you the 700-800 wireless spots in Manhattan, out of which 400 are McDonald's and Starbucks, not ideal for working, I think. And the rest of them, they have user ratings on how the space is, how the lighting, whether you have PowerPoints, and we've actually set up a little icon for our telepresence unit, so you could actually find a unit. So again, we're trying to take this concept of almost like the city is an office versus just thinking through work in these very structured work environments and using ubiquitous technology to think through it. What we're doing now is working with the central government of Korea, and we're working on a plan for about 400 to 500 smart work centers throughout the country, not only for an